Welcome to New Songs for Ourselves. This is going to be a wonderful session, and I'm so happy that you are here with us. Welcome to New Songs for Ourselves. Today's presentation features real-time captioning, so if you're interested in using that, please use the link from the original event listing, or probably more easily, you can find it in the comments below. We recommend opening it in a separate browser window or on a separate device, but it's there and it's going to be quite nice. My name is Deborah Wong. I'm so happy to be here today because I love the music of these three artists. I'm an ethnomusicologist. I teach at the University of California, Riverside in Southern California. And I followed Asian American musicians for some decades at this point, including the three amazing artists that you are about to meet. Very quickly, let me say that the audio you heard for the last 3 minutes coming into this event was Sunny Jane playing Dole. And this is a track from a collaborative recording that you are going to hear later in the program, a collaborative piece that the three artists made together just in the last 10 days or so, and which will be shared in full later in our program this morning. I'd like to acknowledge that the artwork on our flyer was adapted from artwork by Arlen Huang, who in fact is still very active as an artist. You can easily find him on the web. And that image, that drawing, was originally found on the album cover for the A Grain of Sand album that came out in 1973 on the Paradon label. And that album is now still very much available through Smithsonian Folkways Recordings. Our session title and the flyer art, and in fact, you know, the inspiration of the 1973 album, it's all deeply related, and you're about to hear a lot more about that today. Let me say that the three artists and much of the music that you're going to hear today is part of a new series that we've just launched through Smithsonian Folkways. This is titled the Asian Pacific America series, and the whole series features and will feature exceptional contemporary voices, sonic expressions across diverse musical genres. And if I can predict, the albums in this series will reinterpret traditional repertoires and styles, and others will speak directly to collective experiences through song. And all of our featured artists in this new series expands the American soundscape through their creative explorations of identity, community, and diaspora. It's a wonderful new series. Today, we're going to invite you to participate in the conversation. There's a live chat below. So as we go along, please write in your responses, write in your questions. We will be attending to it and building in as many of your questions as we possibly can later in the program. So please participate. This program is a co-presentation of Smithsonian Folkways, the Smithsonian Folklife Festival, and the Smithsonian Asian Pacific American Center, and it's produced in part with federal support, for which we are very, very grateful, from the Smithsonian Asian Pacific Initiatives pool. Now, if you don't know Folkways or the festival, you need to. I absolutely encourage you to check out the websites, folkways.si.edu, or festival.si.edu. These websites are bottomless and constantly full of new and wonderful material. So I encourage you to check out these websites to learn about our programs, our educational resources, and much, 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 much more. Now, very quickly, the three artists that you're going to meet in just a few moments, they are the first three albums in our new series. They are Sunny Jane, Nobuko Miyamoto, and Julian Saporiti. In brief, Sunny Jane is a gifted, we can't categorize any of these people, quite frankly, but Sunny Jane is a gifted musician and composer and band leader who works in, a wonderful mashup of styles, traditional Punjabi, jazz. He's uncategorizable is what he is. And I can tell you that almost all of his music just makes me want to jump up and dance around the room, which I usually do. Nobuko Miyamoto is a dancer and a musician and a singer and a community organizer here in LA. She's a legend in Asian American and Japanese American circles, and she was one of the artists on that 1973 album, A Grain of Sand. Julian Saporiti is a musician and songwriter and troubadour, and he's immersed in an extended project titled No No Boy, after the famous novel by John Okada, and he's writing songs about the broad range of Asian American experiences and histories. Let's begin to bring our artists on. It's enough to hear me talk about them. You need to hear them talk about themselves. So I'm going to bring in our guests one by one. You're going to hear a little bit of their music as we proceed. And then we're going to gather into a circle and have a conversation about what they do and the amazing sounds that they make and why. By the way, it's the last few days of Asian Pacific America Heritage Month. For some of us, it is Asian Pacific Heritage Month every day. But what a wonderful way to wind into the last few days is to spend time with all of you who are watching and these artists. So let's get going on the artists. Our first example is going to be just a teaser video by Sunny Jane. So let's bring that on.
हसीनों ने बुलाया, गले से भी लगाया, बहुत समझाया, यही न समझा।
Sunny Jane, welcome.
Hey, Deb, how are you?
So good, so good. I have so many questions for you. Let's keep it a little brief for now as we bring on our friends, but tell us about that song. And that was the amazing vocalist Ganavia, right?
Yeah, that was Ganavia and Gray McMurray on guitar. And it's a song called Hey Apna Dil To Avara, which in Hindi means My Heart is a Vagabond. And it comes from a 1958 film called Solva Sal, which means 16th year. But the way I know the song is it's a song that traveled with my father and my parents from India to Rochester, New York. And it's a song my dad would always take out his Indian banjo or bulbul tarang and or a harmonium and would kind of play this song. And it was just, my dad wasn't a musician, but he had maybe a repertoire of 4 or 5 songs that he could play. And you'd hear it at least once a week. So it's just like a childhood lullaby and song that brings me closer to this lineage and migration of my family.
That's so beautiful. And the song is beautiful. It's so sweet and also just a little bit of sadness in there, for me anyway. And so much of your album, as we'll get into in just a bit, is about your parents and your family history, right? And well, I should say my sympathies on the passing of your father. I gather he passed about 6 months ago.
Yes.
So what a beautiful, set of memories and homage to him and your family.
Yeah. This album was really, it was about trying to juxtapose the idea of cowboys, like these American identities of cowboys and immigrants, and these qualities that cowboys supposedly have that's very much romanticized. And I thought about my parents and just many immigrants in the communities of how they're so brave and courageous, no matter how they've come over to different lands, but how they're searching for opportunity and traversing these worlds. And these are like these romanticized ideas that we put forth for cowboys that are largely kind of exemplified as white males, gun-toting cowboys. And I kind of want to play around with these ideas, also the idea of cowboys and Indians, and just kind of have fun with it, probe, question, create some dialogue, but really ultimately was drawing ideas from the migration of my family.
The liner notes for your album are just like stunningly beautiful and interesting, and you have several great lines along what you just said. I think you basically say that immigrants are the new cowboys and cowgirls. And
Yeah. There's a lot left out of that narrative that just we have to tell our own stories so the stories exist.
Tell me about it. Yeah. That really is our theme today, right? About
Yeah.
telling our own stories and the absolute urgent necessity of that. Everyone, Sunny Jane's album is the first to come out in the new Asian Pacific America series, and it's titled Wild Wild East, and it came out in February. It's available everywhere you can buy music, and it is a wonderful listen. Sunny, thank you. Let's bring on some of our other friends and then gather into a broader conversation. Let's watch the next video, which is featuring Nobuko Miyamoto and a song that she wrote. Welcome, Nobuko Miyamoto.
Hi. Nice to be here.
What a great song. And you've been focused on environmental and ecological issues for a while now. Tell us about that song.
So actually, it was inspired by the words of Grace Lee Boggs of Detroit, philosopher and activist who died at 100 years old. And she introduced me to the environmental movement, really, because of Detroit. What was going on in Detroit invited me to do a project about urban gardening. And so that's how I got started. This was back in 2002. And then since that time, I've been making a series of music videos about the environment, trying to bring people of color into the environmental conversation. And because we have a culture that honors the environment, and we're not really, being talked about in that way. But also this video brings together, comes together with another beautiful musician. His name is Juan Perez, who's on this recycled cigar box called the Turbo Diddley. And that's what the sound, this incredible sound is, this Turbo Diddley. So, and I thought it was very fitting because it's recycled,
I was actually in the studio the day you recorded that. It was so much fun to watch Juan playing that really big instrument with that, very, very groovy, sort of backbeat going on in it. Yeah. Yes, you've been making eco vids for some years now at this point. How did you manage to film that it was during Shelter at Home that you...
So of course, the song was written before, but then it just started, the Shelter at Home just started, and we shot it in about 3 hours right in my backyard. And then we went to a park, Ken Honjo, one cameraman just set up, and we just set up and did it, and then ran to the park and did some stuff in the park. And that's how he had a mask on. And then later I put a mask on because I figured, well, let's join the party.
Wow.
Yeah.
So. It's a wonderful video. I think we all know what time it is on the clock of the world. One of the things I so admire about you, Nobuko, is not only are you making this amazing and powerful, compelling music, but you're a community organizer. And whenever you create events, you often bring in ecological and environmental, workshops and more around them. I've seen you do this again and again.
Well, that's the Fandango Bone Project, which uses traditional arts of fandango from Veracruz, and obon from the Japanese culture, and also West African dance music. And we, all our workshops, we use art as this leading organizing principle. And we bring in, and then the environmental issues and all of these other issues about community are all woven in together. So we create songs about collective songmaking about issues that concern our community. We want to show that we've been coming together like this in circles for beyond ages, you know. So
Exactly.
reminding people that we're not only connected as communities across borders, which right now is a good example of the fact that we're all connected, but we're also connected with Mother Earth. And so that's the point we try to make in Fandango Obon.
And you sure do. I've taken a workshop on composting and then gone straight into Bonodori dancing. It's great. Yeah. Let's bring on our third friend and colleague here.
Yes.
Let's bring on Julian Saporiti, and then we'll come back to many of these issues. Let's see the next video.
Can you give the world a twist? Just by doing the twist. At the moment the bomb went off, they were playing Purple Haze. I met Robert at his restaurant, Setti and I haunt his home. The door still echo when we jump. Your mother brought back 40 pounds from Paris at 65, and we landed in California. Some broken English rolling stones, Fenders, girls and dogs, America provides.
Oh, hey, Deb.
Okay,
Hey, guys.
everybody, inside joke. He was looking at my second book. Julian, welcome.
Good to be here. Quite an honor.
Yeah, it's great to have you. And just looking at the three of you, I already feel so happy. Julian, tell us a bit about that song.
Yeah, that song has a very specific story. I was in Paris, where a lot of my family went after the Vietnam War, and my mom said to go hang out with one of her old high school friends. A lot of this project that I do, No No Boy, has been about filling in my gaps in Asian and Asian American history through songwriting, through research and stuff like that. So I went to speak to this guy, Robert, and we were having this really nice conversation. He owns a Vietnamese restaurant that's really nice, great food. And he kind of subtly said, "Oh, I was in a band during the war." I was like, that's really interesting. I didn't even think about people on the other side playing in bands, but he told me that really kind of nonchalantly, the American GIs needed bands, so they'd hire us teenagers, and we loved rock and roll through the French and the Americans, and so we'd, get into these helicopters with these drugs and prostitutes and like Fender amps, and and we'd fly over the jungle and people would be shooting at us, and then we'd play Doors and Jimi Hendrix, and I thought that was the most amazing story, also as a card-carrying ethnomusicologist. So we spent the next hour just doing an interview, and that turned into the lyrics of the song. And that led to me discovering a lot of these incredible Cambodian and Vietnamese and other Asian rock and roll bands that aren't talked about too much. These people who are doing it back as far as the 50s, 60s, 70s. And a lot of the footage you see is me scouring the internet to find some of these bands. Particularly this band that still works in Houston called the CBC Band, who are just one of the best rock and roll bands, period, of that era. And they have a couple songs, particularly originals, that were written in Vietnamese that were just really inspiring and sort of added to, the theme of this record of finding this history. I think that, Deborah, you've been trying to uncover for a long time. And
Histories. Yeah.
I have too.
Yeah. Well, this is so central to your process. Just to stay with the song for another moment, this track actually opens with Robert's voice, right?
Mhm.
Because doing interviews and life histories is central to your methodology, right? To how you create your songs.
Absolutely. I've been a really lucky person that I've had a couple failed careers at this point, both as a musician and an academic, and they've woven together beautifully in the last few years. And that audio is sampled from just my interview with Robert at his restaurant, and then we kind of build a track on top of that, and then the song kind of floats across.
Wow. Let's open up the conversation and get all of us talking with one another. And, okay, so let's imagine it's late at night and we've been hanging out for hours already, and we probably had dinner together, and we're pretty relaxed at this point, right? We're just sitting around the table together, or maybe in that corner of Nobuko's living room where the two couches are, so nice next to each other. Yeah. So let's, also ask each other questions as we go along here. Each of you briefly share with us, sort of the concept behind your new album. And I'd especially love to hear you reflect on how it is related to your earlier work, your previous work, because I think each of you have a different relationship with the earlier work. Yeah. So Sonny, why don't you start? Because you've recorded extensively with Red Bharat, your band. Mm-hmm. And many other ways. How does this album relate to anything you've previously done?
I don't know. It's a good question. I mean, I feel like there's always a thread going through whatever I'm working on or putting out. And I think my identity's always played a pivotal role in it. A lot, I think, to what Julian was stating as well. It's to fill these gaps in understanding history and understanding about myself. Feeling like I'm a child of immigrants. So my parents came here in the 70s. I'm growing up with one side that's very religious, Jain, has pujas, functions regularly. We have this South Asian community. Then I go to school with all my Western friends, very few South Asians in class there. And I have these two very distinct worlds. And when I came to music, I think when I started composing is what helped me kind of bridge both of these things. And that's always kind of been the thread going through all my music. And there's different expressions for different feelings, but that's been one constant thread is just that identity through the music.
Okay. So it's a conceptual thread that you follow through your creative work.
Yeah, I think it's also it's a necessity really, in feeling comfortable with myself, in trying to find identity, and trying to find camaraderie in other communities, because for a long time I felt very weird. I was this Indian jazz musician growing up in Rochester, New York, and I didn't really know any other folks that were doing that. It wasn't until maybe I was 17 that I got turned on to percussionist Trilok Gurtu, and he blew my mind, and I was like, oh wow, there's people like me that do this. So yeah, it's very much a search of identity and feeling comfortable with who I am.
I hear you on that,
Yeah.
and in following Asian American musicians, it's impossible to generalize, but of course, what I've been fascinated by is this search for community, search for connection, for exactly what you just described. Yeah.
Yeah.
Nobuko, tell us about your new album, which I believe is going to drop maybe 3 months from now, ish. In the early fall, right? Tell us about your album.
Well, this is the first, oh dear, helicopters. Of course, the helicopters. This is LA. Right. I live in LA, and the helicopter port is right over, the police station is right over there.
Wow.
Anyway, so 120,000 Stories is the title of the album. 120,000 is the number of Japanese Americans that were incarcerated during World War II. But it's also symbolizes the stories and the songs that we haven't heard from Asian America. And it's been 20 years since I've done a solo album. So I had a lot of material. And so there's 2 discs, and one disc is fairly new songs that I've done in the past, say, 10 years or so. And then there's a disc of songs all the way from 1973 to 2013, from A Grain of Sand to Oboe Pieces to musicals that I've written, all kinds of things. So it's a sort of a, you can sort of see the journey in that one side, the archival disc, and then you can hear maybe more personal songs from the disc 1, and that we just made this year. So I'm a 3rd generation Japanese American, and an older one. So I had the camp experience as a baby, as a child. And I grew up really never hearing a song that sang me. And I didn't really miss not having that song, because I wasn't aware that, I was supposed to have one. And the idea that people need something that expresses their own journeys. And we, as Japanese Americans and Asian Americans, we've looked out at other people's songs and heard other people's experiences and seen it on the screen, etc. And really, the search to have some voice, some expression that at first I did it, through being a dancer and relating to music is almost as a way of escaping my loneliness as a child, and being a sort of refugee in my own country where I was born, just moving around. And then having a career for 10 years in show business and films and Broadway and things like that, and reaching its limit of what Asian Americans could do, and seeing that these roles and these things that we're playing are just have nothing to do with my life or the life of my people. So, but I sort of stumbled into my way as a songmaker because of the movement. And I first helped a friend, Antonella Branca, make a film about the Black Panthers. This was in 1968. So I was in the middle of the Black struggle. And then it was like, wow, everything blew up in my head. And they could see, and they knew what Japanese Americans had gone through. They knew about camp. And so there was this first time I had a sense that there was a bigger picture that I was a part of.
Exactly. And this is so much of what I've learned from you, is the ways in which these larger stories actually often connect up, but we have to learn how to do that. Often we are not taught how to connect up the stories, right? Often by the history books, as it were. Your new album, I cannot wait. It's a double album, everybody, 2 CDs, and one disc, as you say, Nobuko, is archival, but a lot of it you have reperformed, rearranged, some's remastered, and you've been very adamant about the fact that this album is not a fossil, it is not a museum piece. It's new.
It's me. I'm not a fossil yet.
No.
I'm not a relic yet, but I think part of what I offer and being here is that I am a connection to the beginning of the Asian American movement.
Exactly.
And in 1970, that I had the good fortune of being there when Asian Americans were rising up and claiming their own identity, their own voice, and a political voice that understood that the system was rigged against us. And that's why we were marching.
And listeners, let me be very clear. Nobuko Miyamoto was, in the middle of that conversation that began to crystallize and formulate a voice for Asian Americans. She was not only in those circles, but she was generating very important conversations. If you've just joined us, you're listening to a live stream brought to you by the Smithsonian Folklife Festival and Smithsonian Folkways. And this is New Songs for Ourselves, featuring 3 stunningly creative, beautiful, dynamic, and inspiring Asian American musicians. Julian Saporiti, tell us a bit about your new album. And as I understand it, it's probably going to drop like a year from now. I believe you want.
Yeah, I think the pandemic has sort of sidetracked everything, so I'm not really sure. I think I heard spring 2021 now. It's 12 songs that are part of a much larger collection that you referred to called No No Boy, named after Okada's novel, one of the great Asian American novels. And it spans everything. My introduction to Asian American history is actually living in Wyoming, which really connects me to the stories of Sunny and Nobuko, because I went up to Heart Mountain, which is one of the camps, and have worked with that museum for the last 7 or 8 years now, producing content and just doing research in their archives and learning about this really hidden history that I never learned about growing up in Nashville, Tennessee, of these, 10 American concentration camps. And from there in Wyoming, you go down to Rock Springs, where in 1885, there's this horrible Chinese massacre. And the West and the whole country is littered with Asian histories. And so that really spurred this investigation into this broader topic, and then gave me the tools to then start talking to my own family and doing my own research about being Vietnamese American. And so all of these stories are kind of woven together in this huge project. There's been one album called 1942, A Gesture to the Camps, and 1975 is the second one, which is, of course, when Saigon fell and my family's life changed forever. But, I should also say, hearing Sunny speak so eloquently about Wild Wild East, one of the foundational things that started my thinking was when I was living in Wyoming. My friend Lu Ling wrote an essay called Wild Wild East about being a Hapa kid looking for any kind of Asian stuff in Laramie where we lived, and going to the Walmart Asian aisle and noticing all the yoga studios and seeing how embedded the sushi restaurants, embedded Asian America was, even out with these in cowboy country. And then my friend Nina, who works at Wyoming, wrote this incredible short story collection called Cowboys and East Indians, sort of documenting some of the similar things that Sunny's getting at. So that's where my story starts, and that's where this project comes from. It's from growing up in Tennessee, not, as Nobuko said, not hearing songs about myself, and then finally, of all places, moving to Wyoming and digging up this history and getting in line with what Sunny and Nobuko are talking about.
Julian, I just that's really exciting. And can I say, I've had the privilege of hearing an early version of the new album. The rest of the world will need to wait a year-ish. But I've been fascinated by your use of, you constantly record sounds here, there, and everywhere. You record the sound of a friend banging on a cistern, right, which becomes a percussive sound in one of your songs. You record the sound of gravel crunching under the feet as you walk through the Heart Mountain site. How did you come upon this method of using so many different kinds of sounds to construct your version of history?
Yeah, I've always loved field recordings, and I think of the work I do as an ethnomusicologist and historian very much as field recordings. And I'm always looking for sound. I think our history is often deaf, and we lose a lot when we don't remember the sounds that accompany, and the music and the dancing that accompanied this history. That's why your work, Deb, is so good. But for me, I just always have even a phone, but I always have some good field recording gear with me. And when I go on tour or I'm doing research, if I'm at Heart Mountain and I'm at the barrack that they've restored, I want to actually hear the sound of the wood, the footsteps that people would have danced to jazz bands on while they were locked up in this camp. Just driving through Oregon on the way moving out to Portland last year, my girlfriend Amelia, who co-produced the album with me, we just stopped because we saw this Chinese cemetery just randomly by the Super 8, and this in the middle of nowhere. No offense to Baker City. We just found all these gravestones, paid our respects, and then the sound of the gravel just captivated me. And then even going down to the southern border, where I've been working a lot this year, playing at refugee camps and things like that, banging on the barbed wire outside detention centers. This all got sampled in sort of, 20th, 21st century hip hop production. And that's the drums for the songs, because I didn't know Sonny back then.
Touche.
So yeah, I think not only talking about these historical moments my family's been through, or the larger Asian American community, or really that American history has been through, taking the sounds of the place and embedding them, even if it's for myself, to know, I'm being supported by these rhythms that are the sounds of an old concentration camp or a new concentration camp, or an old refugee camp or a new refugee camp, and all these things in between. Right. It just felt good, when I was recording on my laptop the way that folk musicians do nowadays, to put that all together. And so I really liked layering those percussion sounds and then singing my little songs on top of them.
Taking the sounds of the past and embedding them, as you say. I'm so struck by the fact that I believe all three of you are doing this in one way or another, in different ways. In each of your albums, I absolutely see it going on. I mean, Sonny, your use of, pulling forward songs and tunes from your childhood, from your parents, listening and, practice. Nobuko, I mean, your entire double album set is it's just imbued with a historical awareness, before I forget, Julian, what is your forthcoming album titled?
Oh, it's called 1975.
Okay. It's the second album to follow his first album, which was titled 1942. Yeah. A
lot of numbers.
Yeah, but important years, right? Significant years. We have just a few moments before I'd like to play your collaborative video and new song. Again, for anyone who has joined us in the last few moments, you're listening to a live stream of three musicians talking about their forthcoming albums, and this event is titled New Songs for Ourselves, because that's what these artists are doing. They are creating new musical narratives about Asian American lives. Can I do a sort of sort of round robin, quick about the ways in which you came to consciousness, each of you, as Asian Americans, and for our listeners, please to be aware that even the phrase Asian American is a construct, but a very careful and critical one that emerged in the 1960s. Believe me, Asian Americans are well aware that Koreans are different from Japanese, are different from Cambodians, are different. We know this. The category indicates a certain political awareness that in the context of North America, Asian Americans are often brought together and face shared oppressions, discrimination, and have shared needs, right?
And we have much more political power by pulling ourselves together, rather than being separate entities at this point. The setting goes for now, claiming ourselves as people of color, right, than just an Asian American. It's a political statement and a truth that our experiences are a little bit different than other people.
Thank you. Wonderfully said. And the fact is, each of you are, very significantly different in terms of your ethnic backgrounds, your generations, your entry, into Asian American issues. So could you each quickly say just a little bit about how you came to consciousness in these ways? How did it happen? When did it happen? Yeah.
Sonny, I'm not able to see Sonny on my screen, but anyway, I'll start since I'm the elder.
Okay, please.
So yeah, as I said, I was introduced to the movement through the Black experience, and in 1970, I met Yuri Kochiyama during the shooting of one of his films in East Harlem, and she grilled me on what camp were your parents were in, blah, blah, blah. And I'm going like, who is this lady? Is she Yuri Kochiyama, if you don't know who she is, was an activist who lived in Harlem, who had 6 children and was friends with Malcolm X, was an activist that really inspired and pulled together people of different cultures as well. So she invited me to come to a meeting of Asian Americans for Action. And that's where I met Chris Ijima, who was one of the leaders, political leaders, And I didn't even know he was a musician until we went to a conference in Chicago in 1970, the summer of 1970, and he brought out his guitar. And it was an intense day of realizing that we were a movement from East and West Coast, etc. We had met with the Panthers, we had met with Native people, and he brought out his guitar and just started strumming and playing, and finally found a groove. And then before you know it, we had written a song. So that's how I stumbled into it. We didn't plan to be, a duet or whatever. We just stumbled into it. And then once we sang that song before an Asian American audience, which was the first for me, we realized how powerful it was. Mm-hmm. Just the feedback, just the energetic feedback that we were getting made us realize, oh my God, this is really our song. And so that's how I stepped into it and just stumbled into it. And the stumbling kept going on. and really, I think without being in the movement and being an organizer and being against the Vietnam War, et cetera, I didn't have that much to say, but it was because I was engaged with this community activism that I found a voice.
Right. By the way, for our listeners, Nobuko Miyamoto's memoir, her book, is going to come out about a year from now from the University of California Press, and she tells her own life history in no uncertain terms. It's a beautiful read, and what she tells over and over again is this process of finding new ways to think about community by interacting directly with other communities, whether African Americans, East Harlem, Puerto Rican communities, and so on and so forth. Look for this book about a year from now. Sonny, how would you describe your own coming to consciousness?
Yeah, before I jump in, I'd love to piggyback on Nobuko and just say thank you, Nobuko, for I just watched this Asian American series that happened on PBS. And all of a sudden I saw you. I was like, oh my God. I'm like, this is amazing.
Great.
But I learned so much, a lot of history that I just wasn't aware of. Even when you're talking about, Nobuko had said people coming together when the Filipinos and the Mexican farmers came together to unite.
Right.
And this idea of what we can do to lift each other up. I think about right now, what is happening as well in the Black communities, in Black liberation and justice of George Floyd, of Ahmaud Arbery, of Breonna Taylor. And, I can think of myself as Asian American, but I try to think of myself as a global citizen. And then there's micros to that, as we were once discussing the other day, Deb, depending upon who's in the room and who you're associating with, it can go to the micro level of being South Asian. That's always kind of what's been my identity growing up, partly forced on me by others in the way that I look because I'm brown, because I have a different name, but also because that was my culture, my religious and cultural background. And being Asian American, it's something I think that came to me probably when I was in college, when I was 18, the bigger scope of Asian Americans, of Koreans, Japanese, Chinese, Filipino, Vietnamese, whatever, you can go down the list of being part of that group. But I also identify with brown and Black communities, identify with Punjabi communities. But overriding all of that is, for me, is how can we create community and uplift one another, especially in the time that we're living in right now, where, God, it's just crazy. As you mentioned, Nobuko, with COVID, we're all connected. We're all connected by this virus, but we also know that it's affecting communities of color. We know that it's affecting marginalized folks, and then we're seeing the killing of Black folks, of Black men and women, and I just felt like I needed to say that. In terms of the Asian American Pacific thing, is it's very much also being tied to everyone else that is out there, that is the earth, that is the human being.
Yeah, I think to piggyback off that, I didn't really, I grew up in a really wonderful, unique place of Nashville, Tennessee back in the 80s and 90s and early 2000s. And didn't see anyone like myself. The only Vietnamese kid besides my brother I knew was this girl Lily, whose mom owned the Chinese Vietnamese grocery store, and I'd climb on the rice bags with her every Friday when my mom would go to get crabs for dinner, and that was it. And then in high school, I started to realize I was different. You know, growing up, it was basically get called Jackie Chan on the playground, got punched in the face a couple of times for being different, and that was it. So it was just like a process of dealing with shame and trying to be as white as possible. High school, you meet Black kids and Latin kids, and sort of at least realize you're different. But I still didn't know any Asian kids for the most part. And it really wasn't until going to Wyoming and meeting those wonderful writers, and then now I'm doing my PhD in Providence, and I had access to like lots of Asian people on a college campus, and I would like any Vietnamese kid I would meet, I'd be like, "Can you get coffee or get lunch or something?" So I'd love to learn about like myself more, you know, and that's kind of in the process. But I was talking to Nobuko earlier this week, and just saying I kind of grew up on this island, and I think that's what a lot of my songs deal with. It's not growing up in an Asian American community. When I first started touring this, I was touring with a classmate of mine named Aaron, and people would come up to us, old Asian American activists at concerts on the West and East Coast, be like, "You guys are like your generation's grain of sand." I was like, "What is that?" So this is incredible to learn what that is through the actual person who put that out there. But I didn't grow up with that because it wasn't widely released, you know? And that's why I think these records could be useful to a kid like me who's 12 in Missouri or Arkansas or wherever, who might look different, or just, you know, it's good when you learn about different cultures and stuff. So my consciousness, I still don't really know what Asian American means, and that's why I've done this really super elaborate dissertation album project, I guess.
But most Americans don't have that
Exactly.
have the ability to have intimate exchange with with Asian Americans and their uniqueness. And then I think when I was just thinking about how different the three of us are, the four of us are right here on the screen, of growing up in Queens or LA or Nashville. I mean, I've never been to Nashville. You know what I mean? I can't imagine what that's like either. So, you know,
it's pretty nice. It's pretty nice.
So all of us, I mean, we've all had different kinds of experiences growing up in our neighborhoods, but having people giving a chance to really open up and having the larger America look at us and to see that we are part of the American tapestry, and with respect to Native people whose land we share, that we are here because of them, so. To see the real picture of what America is and how it could be, it's important to have music. It's important to have the arts to tell that story.
Yeah.
Essential.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my God. I just knew that this would be like an amazing conversation with the three of you. You know, and Chief, you were saying in so many different ways that you know, Asian America is so expansive and constantly evolving as a concept that invites solidarities and alliances and connections across difference, right? Each of you live in such compelling ways. And we didn't even get to the fact that many of us in this room are in fact multi-ethnic, right? But we are running out of time. And I really, really, really want our viewers to get to see this amazing collaborative song and video that the three of you somehow managed to create very quickly over the last 10 days. Before we watch it, which we're about to do, tell us a bit about writing this song, how you did it, what was your process? Tell us about the song.
It's Sonny's fault.
Sonny gave us some drums. Nobuko did some wonderful lyricizing and meditating on top of it, and then I put some noises, and that's it.
and Charlie put the video together.
Yeah, Charlie's the real
Charlie
hero.
Weber, the amazing Charlie Weber.
Said, don't think too much, just do it. You know.
Yeah.
It was like
whatever strikes you. Yeah.
Wow. So it's pretty fast. It was pretty spontaneous. It was pretty just like boom, boom, boom.
The speed of an email.
Wow. Amazing. All right, let's watch it. Let's take a look at this.
chatter, what does it matter? Glitter, glitter, what are we after? Nothing. Be nothing. Be nothing.
Ooh, yeah,
Yeah.
it's wonderful.
Fun.
Yeah, I can tell you had fun too. Hey, we should. This is terrible. I should get to some of the viewers' questions. They're like clamoring to ask you questions. Here's one from Ryan. Ryan asks, "Who were some of your Asian American role models growing up, musically and otherwise?"
Yeah, I think part of my project is the fact that I didn't see anyone. There was just no one. There was no one in Nashville in the music scene. I mean, I grew up. My dad is in the country music industry. He was an executive and record promoter and musician and stuff. And a wonderful childhood of going to country music stars' houses and things like that. But I guess Neil McCoy was Filipino, but I didn't know that.
Yeah,
I didn't know it by the name. It wasn't. And then I was an indie rock band that toured all over Europe and North America when I was younger, called the Young Republic. And there was 2 Korean kids in my band who were Korean nationals, but I didn't meet any other Asian Americans in any bands. And I think it's only recently that I've seen other musicians like Michelle from Japanese Breakfast or Mitski, just some incredible indie rock performers. And then, people like my colleagues here doing wonderful stuff. Obviously, Nobuko was doing wonderful stuff, but I couldn't get a Grain of Sand record at Grimey's record shop growing up for some reason. Yeah.
Sonny, what about you?
For me, I mean, the reason I played drums was Zakir Hussain. And listening to this 1972 album by Ravi Shankar and Ali Akbar Khan. Who else? Nikhil Banerjee, sitar player. Trilok Gurtu, who I had mentioned. Those are some folks that I remember growing up that I was listening to a lot that kind of influenced me.
Wow, beautiful. Hey,
Also, my influences were actually Black women singers. Nina Simone, Lena Horne, Billie Holiday, because there weren't any. Well, actually, Pat Suzuki was one of the first Japanese American singers who came out of Seattle. She was a Nisei second generation, but other than her, I've never ever saw anybody.
Yeah, I mean, a big part of my research is exactly what Nobuko is saying, is that there have been Asian musicians. There's a whole, Chinese American jazz circuit. There was a Nisei jazz circuit before the war. There, like I said, there was these Vietnamese people, Cambodian people, Filipinos since way back playing rock and roll and pop music. But those records just have barely trickled out. Grain of Sand didn't make it to me. One of the songs on my album is about the Georgie Gawa Orchestra, which was the big band that formed at Heart Mountain during the war. And my friend Joy, I even made a short film about her, and her singing, and the fact that there were all these musicians. There was a really rich culture, but weren't necessarily recorded, or if they were, But like we talked about, it wasn't until this movement in the 70s where Asian American even becomes an idea. It doesn't become codified.
But even so, all of it was still contained within our communities. It was not, it was ghettoized.
Yeah.
And we've never, and record companies would say, well, we don't have a market for you. That was their big excuse. So
I want to do a 30-second lightning round to kind of, sadly, wrap things up. We have a question in the chat. Real quick, just drop some names. What are some other contemporary musicians who you see as challenging, perceived stereotypes of Asian Pacific American artists? I'm going to go like Milk, Connie Lim.
I mean, I think the artists I mentioned, Japanese Breakfast, Mitski. I mean, there's a whole bunch that have come out in the last 10 years that are, I think, challenging stereotypes just by being musicians in the first place. Any pop musician, who isn't, going into the parents' chosen field or whatever, and kind of has the guts to just be on a stage. That's not something we've typically been highlighted for doing. It's something that we have done, but yeah, how long has it taken for Folkways to put out Asian American records? please still put out my record, guys.
No, go, Sunny. Give us some names. Give us some people we should be listening to.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
I mean, there are a bunch, and yeah, Julian's absolutely right. Hasib is one person that comes to mind. Muslim rapper out in LA.
Yeah.
There was Himanshu, who's doing great stuff. I think he's eventually got some stuff coming out. Ganavia, who's also on the album, is working on some things. There's singer Ravina, who I think is in Massachusetts. There's a whole host of folks. I'm just blanking right now, but they're out. Yeah, there's a bunch of folks out there.
Yeah, and for me, even the people that like this is a very collaborative process, and artists like Takanobu Kishibashi, Aaron Aoyama, my girlfriend Amelia, Joyce Kwan, incredible Asian artists who have helped me put the sounds and harmonies onto this record. That's part of this too. Not only sounds of the past, but yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, good. They've answered.
That was great. And I don't want to wrap up, but we absolutely have to. And the one last question I want to share from the chat is from Kaoru, possibly Watanabe, I'm not sure. He wants to know, question for Julian, how many times a week do people confuse you with Steve Aoki?
This hair will not be permanent, but like the rest of us, it's been growing out. So, and I just have mustache envy from Sunny, working with Sunny. So I've been trying to get there. Nobody said she was going to grow one out, but I guess it didn't take.
Epic mustaches. Yeah, you three are so wonderful. Thank you for sharing. Your sound. Thank you for what you do. Thank you for the ways in which you just sort of open up new worlds for all of us. I can't wait.
Buy Deb's book. She's awesome.
Yes.
Get my new book, which is free, as a matter of fact. Oh. But to our listeners, thank you so much for joining us today. There are many thanks to be given. You see the four of us, but in fact, there's a huge team of people behind the scenes right now, live, who are doing great things. I do, of course, want to thank Nobuko, Sunny, and Julian, but I also want to offer thanks to Sojin Kim, Jonathan Williger, Alyssa DeHaze, Charlie Weber, the amazing Charlie Weber, Alyssa Huff, Sarah Rothman, Diane Nutting, Alex Taggart, Claudia Foronda, Haley Dardar, and the sublime Sabrina Lynn Motley from Smithsonian Folklife Festival, and the heartfelt Hob Skippers, who is the director of Smithsonian Folkways. And of course, you should follow Smithsonian Folkways and the Folklife pages here on Facebook to get notifications about future events, such as the live stream next week. Don't you want to see that? And find us also on Instagram and YouTube. Visit our website. There's so much going on, and you need to be connected to it. Hey, we're going to go out with some music, of course. We're going to go out with an excerpt from a collaborative work in progress, again, with these artists, featuring music by Sunny and Julian, and words excerpted from an interview that Julian recorded with Nobuko very recently, with video by Charlie Weber from the Smithsonian Center for Folklife and Cultural Heritage. You can look forward to seeing the whole thing sometime soon in the near future. So let's go out on that. And again, thank you to the three of you. Thank you.
Stay healthy, everybody.
Yeah, stay healthy.
Thank you, guys.
I grew up without hearing a song about me. I had been trained as a dancer mainly and working in show business, in Flower Drum Song, King and I, all of these films and Broadway shows that were white people writing about Asians. My frustration was there was only so far I could go. I really wanted to cross the color line. So why can't I just be myself and make a living? When I was about 13 and I got a scholarship at American School of Dance, the director said, in order for you to make a living as a dancer, you have to be twice as good as everybody else. So this idea of twice as good was echoing in my head for most of my career. And the only time I really did cross the color line was when I was in the film A West Side Story, which I passed for Puerto Rican. Then after West Side Story, you're going like, okay, what do I do now? Then I really started studying singing. And then I said, well, at least I can sing the kind of songs that I want to sing.
Thank you all.